most of the business out of the way, it's time for fun, everyone. So ask yourself this: what happens when a nearly unstoppable force meets various immovable objects? Well, in this bout here, it's the guy that gets the first hit in that barely lives to tell the tale, but for the rest of the gang, this particular bear is here to slice and dice its way to supreme victories. For the most part, that is, as he's actually not as good as many in the community may have made him out to be. Still, with 8,000 health and 175 damage per swing to his name, both backed up by additional planar mechanics for even more protection and hurt mind, the armored Bearger is no pushover. Normal Deerclops, on the other hand, is, even if she can still effectively freeze the guy, which prolongs the fight, but come on now, we can do better than that. So enter Deerclops' newest mutation, Crystal Deerclops, repping 6,000 health and 150 plus damage itself, alongside its very own planar nonsense, of course. I think we can all agree that this is going to be the first true test for our fluffy friend. And I think you'll also be surprised to see that it's going to be a lot closer than we all thought it would be at the end of the day. Those extra attacks that Deerclops can get via freezing the guy add up quickly, even if the Bearger can blend most anything. He will win, but she will have knocked him below half health with ease along the way, so maybe she deserves a video like this too. But as we continue here, know that I'm actually going in order of how one would encounter these bosses after spawning in an armored Bearger over just showcasing his best fights, so no surprise here, a Claw Showdown is inevitably going to become an Enraged Claw Showdown, and we all know how this goes. The evil Santa simply absorbs way too much damage while doing a stupid amount of it himself, and given how he will enter Enraged mode almost immediately, his health pool is going to be ridiculous. So nope, sadly there is no way around it, Enraged Claws still reign supreme. Moose Goose and her demon spawns, on the other hand, well, are kind of just dead on arrival. Still, this is the first case where we get to see the armored Bearger's shredding capabilities fully at play. With nobody kiting the guy, and the giants being those immovable objects I mentioned, all the Bearger will do is swipe, swipe, and oh yeah, swipe some more at 205 damage apiece. Next to nothing's gonna be able to stand up to that, let alone a boss that barely attacks and has no other special abilities or effects like Deerclops. And as for the Mosslings, one or two fell swoops and they're all dead. It's easy peasy. But here's one that might surprise you. The Antlion can get in on the action today, and for the most part, things will run very smooth without you. There are some clear signs that prove that the Bearger is going to target her sand spikes and castles over her, so he will occasionally drop aggro, which is going to lead to him kind of wandering off and you getting involved, but as long as he's close to a target, you're good. His ultra aggressiveness will save a lot of these fights today, actually, so good luck. And perhaps have some fun with some double vision while you're at it. Now this is going to be a case of you versus the guy she told you not to worry about, so I'm sure we're pretty sure how this is all about to go down. So instead, I implore you to notice the one other quote-unquote downside of the armored Bearger's swipes, his ability to push stuff over long distances. Yes, it matters, and yes, it's gonna cause some issues with some upcoming big bads. Say like the Bee Queen here. Starting this particular fight is also one of the most challenging of the bunch, as she and her Grumblebees are annoying with their aggro, but once she realizes that she's getting destroyed by a giant badger and not us, you'll be off the hook. Unless she gets pushed over the water, of course. The Bearger will win with ease, but the length of this fight will entirely depend on the direction these two bring it, in all honesty. It's solid, it's just the first real finicky one, I think. But the truest form of all we have seen and heard about thus far comes to fruition in the Dragonfly fight. Spoiler alert, Dragonfly is more than likely to be pushed too far from her arena, resulting in a complete waste of time. However, I can say with certainty that will not always be the case. If you get lucky, or perhaps use a pan flutes sparingly during the second or third spawning phases, I bet this could work. As number one, because my first ever attempt saw Dragonfly getting down to the below 7,000 health range, which is very promising, and number two, the new mutants can't be slept themselves, so we will have full control over their targets whenever we need to. It's very, very plausible. It's just not foolproof. But next up, the shadow pieces. Yet another that might surprise folk. The difficulties will arise from having to balance 4 aggros at the start of the fight, but keep them all close enough, and sooner rather than later, it will become 2 versus 1, and you'll be pretty safe to watch the slow chaos. And that's the thing about this particular fight. It's shockingly boring and tedious. Of course, it does have plenty to do with the last piece of mine being the bishop, meaning Bearger wasn't able to actually deal damage half the time, but still, it's not as straightforward as you would think. In fact, if your fight goes this route, the bishop is probably going to end up dropping our big friend down to the low 2000s health-wise, which is even better than the crystal deerclots for Pete's sake. So it's an almost a no-go, believe it or not. So to continue down that line, actually, if you expected the twins to be trumped, then you're fired, because next to nothing trumps the twins. First of all, getting them all to aggro consistently on one another will require plenty of runaround at first, and second, there's just too much movement of these two for our guy to get any consistent damage in anyways before they shred him instead. Heck, the twins will barely reach their second phase in all this. So yeah, no, I do not recommend this one. Plus, it's going to take multiple nights to set up anyways, which means more setup between those nights, which is way more than any of the other fights. Not worth it. But lastly, mostly because both the ocean bosses are essentially off limits, the 3 phases of the Celestial Champion. And as you can imagine, all 3 are going to go down exactly the same as always. Phase 1 can't really do much, and will be pushed around with relative ease. Literally. Phase 2 will be too, however, as we know, its spin attack is just way too frickin' much if you get caught up in it, and the Armored Bearger is no exception. The Armored Bearger will survive it, trust me, but the bulk of the damage it's going to take is going to come right here, and it will dictate the rest of the fight. A fight that we could easily win otherwise, honestly, as even on a weak point, he gets phase 3 all the way down to the mid 4500 health range. But in the end, it's going to be too much for one guy to take down 3, unfortunately. But there you have it, everyone. The Armored Bearger versus every boss in Don't Starve Together, at least on the surface, and including himself. Overall, I would say we have gotten what we should have expected. But now that it's all said and done, I do have to think that a potential showcase with the Crystal Deerclops may also be in order. At least to some degree, as I don't see it being better in some cases. But thanks for watching, folks. Well wishes to all, embrace the mutants, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.